Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and strength coach. I specialize in vestibular disorders, and you are on the Steady Coach. Today we're going to be talking about why kind people are so overrepresented among people who are suffering from chronic dizziness symptoms. And that includes people who are particularly prone to what I call compulsive caregiving. They take it upon themselves to always be the person giving care to other people. Whether that person is what some people would call a people pleaser. In other words, that person has trouble saying no and always wants to do everything for other people, or someone who's just particularly conscientious and always worrying about others. People who have these traits really are overrepresented among people who have chronic dizziness. So today I'm going to make a case for why that is, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to start to change some of those patterns in yourself, because in many cases, it is a big part of the story in understanding how you ended up with chronic dizziness symptoms, and it needs to be a part of the story in your recovery as well. So first, let's connect these traits to what I call on this channel neural circuit dizziness. And neural circuit dizziness is a term that I use as a catch-all to describe medically unexplained chronic dizziness symptoms. So that includes diagnoses like PPPD, like MdDS, like vestibular migraine, but may include other forms of medically unexplained chronic dizziness symptoms. Neural circuit dizziness refers to the fact that no tissue damage or physical disease is causing these symptoms. Rather, the symptoms are the result of a brain error, or what I call a circuit in the brain, and that this error is reversible because ultimately the tissue damage or disease process that we normally think of as causing disease isn't present. On this channel, I explain a lot about how danger mode in the brain is what often leads to these prediction errors. In other words, I talk about how danger mode will often fuel these circuits and how reducing danger mode in the brain ultimately can stop the circuits from acting this way. And if you want to learn more about the basics here, please watch the video that I'm going to link to in the description on basics of neural circuit dizziness. All that being said, the important thing to note here is that our brains are not very good at differentiating between physical causes of danger mode and emotional causes of danger mode. I think we can all relate to the idea that a physical source of stress or danger, like being chased by a wild animal, would put our brains in danger mode so our bodies could respond appropriately. But I think that often people focus a little bit less on emotional causes of danger mode, such as when you have an argument with your spouse or when you're preparing for a big test. So both physical and emotional factors can lead to the brain going into danger mode, but our internal environment, how we interpret the threat, also influences just how much of a response we have. So if you're the kind of person who can't say no to taking care of other people, or has some of the other traits I mentioned at the beginning, I think you're probably already aware of the physical causes of stress that might be affecting you. When you take care of others, it's very hard to take care of yourself. Your sleep, your exercise, your eating habits might be affected. You might be running around on behalf of other people or spending time doing things for them instead of for yourself. And again, I think these are relatively obvious sources of stress that for many people, of course, can lead to danger mode. But those of you with chronic dizziness symptoms have an exaggerated danger mode. In other words, your brain is very, very sensitive to stress. And It's not because you're less resilient to stress than the average person. It's that the emotional stress that you're under in response to all these outside things is much greater. So remember how we talked about how emotional factors can also lead to danger mode? Well, if you're also under the physical stress, the outside stress that we just talked about, and on the inside, you are under a ton of emotional stress, you're going to have a much greater likelihood of going into danger mode and ending up with chronic symptoms. So what I see in my work with one-on-one clients, and now here on YouTube and in my membership community, the hardest working people, the most conscientious, the most responsible are the ones who end up with chronic dizziness. Why? Because in addition to all the other stress that they're already under, perhaps due to circumstances completely out of their control, on the inside, there's an added amount of emotional stress. So why are you under more emotional stress if you have some of these wonderful traits that we talked about at the beginning of the video and just now? Why are you under more emotional stress if you're a kind person, if you're someone who has trouble saying no, or if you're the kind of person who has to take care of others? I think one way to think about this is that you probably have very high expectations of yourself if you are this kind of person. And there's nothing bad about that at all. But what it does mean is that you are more prone to being affected by some of the messages that you may have received earlier in your life or just from society as a whole. Namely, in our society as a whole, at least in Western culture, emotions are generally put into two categories: positive and negative. You're supposed to feel happy. You're supposed to try to feel fulfilled and joyful. You're not really supposed to feel angry and ashamed. And again, these messages are subtle. They come from our society. Again, for many of us, they come from childhood. So as a particularly kind or conscientious person, you're going to be more sensitive to these kinds of messages, which means that you're going to be more likely to bulldoze through when you have negative emotions or actively push them aside to continue the things that you think are worthy or good. I can think of many examples of this, but the most obvious one is something I see a lot in my clients related to taking care of an older relative or a younger relative. Again, a lot of these things are out of our control. The physical stress is out of our control, but particularly kind, conscientious people who are put in this position are going to be a lot less likely to participate in self-care because they have this mindset, I just need to do what needs to be done. Or there's no point in getting upset and angry about this, I just need to do it. And while that may work for the short term, it doesn't work long term because it means that you're not necessarily getting the signals that your emotions are sending you. In other words, you're much more likely to push those negative thoughts, those negative emotions away and just try to either bulldoze through or focus on the positive. And of course, I'm not at all saying that you shouldn't be persistent or that you shouldn't try to focus on the good in your life. Those are definitely good things, but I'm talking about when this is taken to an extreme, when you can't acknowledge the feelings that you have, when you can't acknowledge how hard things are because you feel like you just have to do these things. And this can end up leaving some of our emotions by the wayside. So for example, if you're taking care of an older parent who is sick with some kind of terminal illness, you may not have the time to spend on your own grieving process, and you may be pushing that aside. If you're taking care of a younger relative who has special needs, you might feel that it's unacceptable to be angry about the fact that you have to take on this role. And in both of these situations, or in many other situations, you may tell yourself, I need to take better care of myself, but then immediately get overwhelmed by guilt when you try to do so. When we have emotions that we are not able to express or feel, the brain interprets that as very dangerous. Think about it this way. When you first learned not to put your hand on a hot stove, you may have had a single bad experience. Your brain learned, wow, that stove is hot, don't touch it, not good. Our brain learns from these kinds of exposures to experiences that lead to problems. If every time you feel angry or every time you feel sad, you refuse to feel it because you've got other things to do, you're actually sending your brain the message that those emotions are not safe to have. Eventually, your brain is going to oblige by automatically pushing them down before you even have a chance to feel them, and it's also going to turn on that danger mode to let you know that a dangerous emotion has just happened. If you repeat this over a great enough period of time, combined with again, those outside stressors related to being this kind of person, this wonderful, kind, caring kind of person, you have a recipe for ongoing high levels of danger mode in your brain all the time that can lead to neural circuit dizziness. So how do we deal with this? The first and most important point is awareness. And the reason I say this is because without awareness, you have no choices, but with awareness, you have enough space to make decisions. Does that mean you're not going to care for your relative or you're not going to be kind to people? Absolutely not. But it means that you are making a conscious decision to do that rather than letting these automatic processes do it for you. And again, since the drivers of chronic dizziness are all these automatic processes happening under the scenes, this can make a really big difference in and of itself. But the second component here is that when you have an awareness that you're doing it, that you're compulsively trying to help people, that you're having trouble saying no, that you really don't want to set a boundary, it gives you the opportunity to ask yourself this very important question: what am I not willing to feel right now? When we have responses like this that happen automatically, it means that there's something about the situation that's making us uncomfortable, and we're responding in order to distance ourselves from the discomfort. So in the examples that I gave previously, if you were taking care of an older relative who was getting close to passing away and you felt a lot of grief, you might find yourself at the hospital all the time. You might find yourself driving someone around to appointments, never taking time for yourself because you don't want to be alone with your feelings. And in other examples, you might find yourself having trouble setting boundaries as needed when you're feeling angry because it's not a feeling that you're willing to have. I want to remind you guys that emotions are just signals. They don't mean that you're a good or bad person. You are allowed to be angry and have mixed feelings about things, and what determines whether you are a kind person or not is how you decide to act on those things. It does not make you a bad person to be angry or feel a lot of grief over something that's happening to you. So what I advise people here is, once you have the awareness that you're behaving this way, I ask you to find the pain point. What is that point at which I'm not willing to feel something? And what is that emotion? Can you choose to feel that emotion and accept it? And can you choose to make a different choice sometimes about how you care for others and care for yourself? We'll be talking more about processing emotions in a future video, but a lot of this may even just come down to changing your habits. And I have a video on habit change that I will link to in the description as well. So you can check that out for some ideas on how to change habits. Another important point here is that past traumas, not just childhood experiences, but actual traumas, can lead us to develop some of these traits and become very rigid with these traits. So if you have a history of trauma or really difficult experiences in your life, that may be one reason why these habits or these traits are so difficult for you to change, and why you might feel a little bit more confused about what emotions are underlying that stuff. When we have a very difficult experience, our brain gets really good at trying to keep us away from those feelings so that we can move on and stay away from the danger. But ultimately, again, if this emotional component of danger mode is not being addressed, then we're going to have a harder time getting ourselves out of danger mode and feeling better. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. Again, this is a very complicated topic, really hard to distill down into a 10-15 minute YouTube video, but I hope, again, the information I shared today was helpful. And again, you can watch my channel for follow-ups that will include more information on how to process emotions. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please like, please share, please subscribe, and of course, you can drop your questions and comments below. I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for tuning in.